Joining us now, AJ Delgado. She's live. She's in Miami, Florida. She's a senior policy advisor to America First Policies. This is a political action committee, the biggest that is supporting the president's agenda and his policies. AJ was also with the Trump campaign in some of the most critical times in 2016, and she's back with us. AJ, sorry for the wait. Good to have you with us.
No, John, I love hearing about the CNN clip last night. I keep hearing about it all over Twitter. I've got to watch this clip. What happened?
Well, it was pretty bizarre. I mean, Don came on. It was, me, a never Trumper, two Trump haters, and Don. And it came on. Don did his 5-minute, very impassioned narrative, and I respect his opinion on that. And then Maria Cantrell, I think, got on, and she was very passionate about they were all calling Trump a racist over his comments yesterday, and I immediately disputed it and said this has nothing to do with race, it's about economics. And I said, look, I mean, turning it into race is a lazy man's argument. And Don took exception to that, so I got put in timeout. But
you're absolutely right. It is a lazy man's argument. In fact, it's almost racist the way people read into his comment as though it had anything to do with the people, much less their color. It was about the circumstances, most likely the governments of those nations that have turned these places, let's assume he even said that, into a quote-unquote shithole. Nothing to do with the people, much less with their race. I find it offensive that anybody would read that into it.
Well, that was my point last night, is every argument, it just gets turned into racism, and that's the narrative that is being pushed, and it has nothing to do. And I know what Trump meant yesterday, and whether he said it or not, I mean, here's the problem. The White House press office didn't deny he said it yesterday. That's why I didn't take that tack, because they didn't deny it, so I got to go with it. But look, even if he did say it or something like it, he uses colorful language. That's who he is. But it's no different than you would say at your kitchen table, take out the expletive, which is, why are we bringing people in from corrupt countries that drive down wages and drive up our debt? Like, who does this? And the president wants to have a long-term legislative solution to a broken immigration system to stop illegals from coming in unabated and fix the legal aspect. So we go to a merit-based system. How is that racist? How is that racist?
And it's actually counterproductive precisely because of the problems that these very troubled nations have. And again, it's nothing to do with the people. It's with the governments usually and the economics of these nations. We're bringing in very low-skilled labor from those countries in particular that he mentioned, of course. And precisely the reason we shouldn't be bringing that labor right now is because automation, John, is taking over most of those jobs. So that's precisely the type of labor we probably need to move away from bringing in and moving more towards merit-based. When he says we should be bringing in more people from Norway, let's assume he made that comment as reported. Everyone takes that to mean, oh, look, what a racist. He's talking about bringing in 6'3" blonde Norwegians. No, he's not. Why don't you look at the facts and recall that he was meeting with the Norwegian Prime Minister just a few days ago? Maybe that had something to do with it. Maybe the Norwegian Prime Minister mentioned how well Norway's doing. Their government programs do so well. And that's why President Trump was thinking, we need more people from there because, hey, they're doing something right. Why is it people rush to assume that it's because Norwegians are blonde, white, Northern Europeans? Why not because their country is doing so well that he thought those are the type of people that can help us do better as well? This is what I mean about the racism being in the eye of the media, not of President Trump. It's really revealing what has happened in the last 24 hours.
Well, the president's not a racist. You're not a racist. I'm not a racist. Every time you have an argument, it's not a racist argument. The president has been consistent since the day he announced his candidacy and came down that escalator in his vision, which is to reform a broken immigration system in the United States that is not benefiting Americans. And
right.
unless you want to,
and I should share a personal anecdote about President Trump during the campaign. As you know, Haitians make up a great deal of the minority community in Miami, Florida. I was with Mr. Trump at many of these events. We even did an event with the Haitian community here in Miami. I was with him in private discussing the issues of the Haitian and Cuban American and Venezuelan and general Hispanic community. Never once, John, not once, did President Trump, then candidate Trump, at any time even say anything remotely offensive or that I would find, well, that sounded a bit off, or I think he has kind of a dim view of Haitians or Venezuelans or Cubans. Not at all, quite the opposite. So it irks me and it angers me this morning to have to be defending President Trump against a false charge that he would say anything related to the Haitian people, because I saw that man for myself meeting with those people. I saw the emotion in his eyes when he heard about what they go through. I saw and I heard how much he cares about these communities. So I lived it, and it is completely false to claim about Haitians in particular that he would say or thinks anything derogatory about them as a people. If anything, because he cares about them as a people, having met with them one-on-one, it irks him and it angers him that these governments are creating such terrible circumstances. And if he did call those nations a shithole, hey, if he were to call Cuba a shithole, my parents are from Cuba. I adore Cuba. I would be the first one to say it is. It's a totalitarian regime. Go ahead and call it a defending me. You're defending the people that fled it and supporting why we fled it. Why is that a derogatory thing to say about peoples versus the actual governments there? You're defending the people who left by saying so.
Look, if he said the statement, you're right, AJ, and I said this on CNN, truer statement in the Oval Office has never been made. I mean, these countries with corrupt governments that cannot properly educate or train their people or give them a better way of life, I mean, they're in bad shape. And so you can take an open border situation, which says basically let anybody come in at any time. Let's let them all come and flood in. And if they can't get a job and they can't support themselves, we'll put them on welfare. We'll give them food stamps, Obama phone, housing, bus fare, Greyhound, whatever it is. Well, that's one way to look at it. But the country has a $20 trillion debt. And even when you look at the unemployment numbers, AJ, both of us know that the unemployment numbers right now do not include the number of workers who have simply dropped out of the system in looking for a job. They've simply dropped out. They've given up. We got to start to get those people back in. And you cannot dispute fact, which is wages have been stagnant in America, AJ, for 40 years. Stagnant. They have not gone up. Because of immigration, both illegal and legal. And so until you come to grips with this economic argument and stop the nonsense about what he said or about race, you're never going to solve this problem or even have, AJ, an intellectually sound argument.
Right, and it's not just the wages that they drive down. The worst is the fatal combo, as I call it. Drive down wages, but drive up the prices of rental and even homes, even home purchasing. Where I live in Miami, you have many Haitians, many Salvadorians, wonderful, wonderful people. It's a hugely diverse community. Love it. Great. The problem is when you have so much immigration in a place, the wages here are terrible. Guess what? The rents are through the roof, because there's so many darn people competing for the same housing. So it's a really tough situation to have when, as you say, the unemployment numbers still don't include those who have simply dropped out. It's not as rosy as some would make us think when they're pushing. You know, on the one hand, they want to say the Trump economy isn't doing well, and they'll say the unemployment numbers are great. On the other hand, the unemployment numbers are it's not really including those who have dropped out of the labor force, as you say. So we do have to keep in mind those American workers, and we don't need to import competition for them, which is what we do with if the Democrats would have their way, almost unlimited immigration, it seems. I mean, I still don't understand this Salvadorian temporary protection status that has lasted how many years? 20 years? How is that temporary? And why? Because of earthquakes? I sympathize, but I also sympathize with Americans, and I also sympathize with those trying to come in the legal and an orderly way. And not that they didn't come in legally, they did have some status, but at some point, if it's temporary, it does need to be revoked. I don't see how that's particularly callous of this administration to do so. We can't just have open borders, John. And it seems when you say that common sense point, it's somehow racist.
Well, that's where the argument is headed, because, again, AJ, when you can't win an argument with math, economics, and numbers, and facts. You have to go back to emotion, and that's what certainly on CNN they attempted to do last night. And I mean, Don Lemon has a right to his view. I don't agree with it, and I thought his narrative was off. Was certainly passionate, but not exactly what I would have done. But here's the bottom line: when you go to the El Salvador, the temporary, what's that called? There's an acronym for that. I think it's called the TPS or something. It's the temporary program where you come into it's called the temporary protection status, TPS. And it's where you're allowed to come into the country when your country has a catastrophe, like a hurricane, an earthquake, something of that nature. And we had it in El Salvador during their problems. But you come here and it's temporary until the country fixes their problems, gets back on their feet. That's why the program is called Temporary Protection Status, TPS, not permanent. This was never meant to be a permanent bridge or pathway to citizenship. It was meant to be a short-term fix until they got their country straightened out, and then they go back home. And so Americans have big hearts.
It started because of a civil war they were having in the 90s, and it was supposed to last 2 years. And the 2 years were extended. Then there were some earthquakes. So then that got extended, and it kept being extended. And now it's been 20 years. Again, we all sympathize because Americans, what we're known for is our huge hearts. We get it. The problem is everybody in the world wants to come live here. Everybody. So what is the answer? If you can't say no to anyone because it means you're not being sympathetic and you're not being compassionate, then where do you draw the line? We do need to draw the line. Or are we just admitting now that we need to have open borders, and if we don't, you're somehow a terrible person, you're somehow a racist? Thank God, John, that we finally have a president who is willing to not even put Americans first, but just have some common sense. I'm not even asking for Americans to be put first, but we just need common sense. You cannot flood the boat. We simply cannot have open borders. And it seems Democrats, that's where we're headed. That's the thinly veiled theme of everything they're pushing, is if you say we can't, you're somehow a racist. You want to shut the door behind you.
Exactly. And it's a sad state of affairs when you want to reform immigration for the benefit of the American worker, and somehow, because you're doing that, you're a racist. This is a word now that's just thrown around. And so basically what Don Lemon said last night in his opening is, if you're a Trump supporter, you're a racist. If you voted for Trump, you're a racist. If you defend Trump, you're a racist. If you are a friend of Trump's, you're a racist. If you're going to vote for Trump in 2020, you're a racist. If you're on TV as a Trump surrogate, you're a racist. If you're on the radio...
I'd like to ask Don, by the way, I wrote about this in National Review a few years ago. You know who suffers the most, if he wants to talk about racism? Do you know who suffers the most from illegal immigrant labor, the competition? It's young African-American men whose jobs are taken the most. They're the biggest casualty of illegal immigrant labor. So oddly enough, if you wanted to defend the right of an African-American male to make a good living as he's entitled to, because those are the individuals who built this country on their backs, why is it then that you would support illegal immigration? It seems to be that would be the racist position to have, Don. It seems to me the Trump supporters are the ones supporting the right of the African-American male to have a job that pays a living, good wage, and not face this constant competition of illegal immigrant labor. Seems to me we're the ones looking out for them.
One would think so, right? AJ, we're out of time. I want to thank AJ Delgado for being with us. You can follow AJ on Twitter. AJ, what's your Twitter handle?
AJ Delgado 13.
AJ at AJ Delgado 13. AJ, always great to have you on. Thank you so much. Love your perspective.
Thank you. And thanks for knocking him down on CNN, John. You were great.
Oh, thank you, AJ. Thank you so much.